Money, Money, Monday.
Hey everyone!
Hello.
Welcome to Money Monday! We're finally back. I tell you, Mondays have been insane
Crazy.
lately. I don't know how we've managed to be so busy on Mondays, but here we are. We're back at it, and today we're going to talk about FICO score. Because if you remember the plan that we follow with our finances, it has 7 baby steps is what they call them. And the second baby step is to be rid of all non-mortgage debt, which sounds really good at first, and then people kind of panic because they're like, but my FICO score, how do I live without a good FICO score? Now, if you don't know, your FICO score, more commonly called your credit score, I don't know, many people call it a FICO score, is your credit score. Here's what it's made up of. So 30% of your FICO score is the amount of money that you owe, 35% is your payment history, 10% is new credit, 15% is the length of your credit history, and the last 10% is kind of the mix of credit. So it's not all just like one type, but that you have lots of different things. But what does that kind of translate to?
Yeah, so as we look through the numbers there, the biggest one, the 35%, is payment history. So making payments on your debt in a timely manner. 30% is how much debt you have. You break it down, and all of these different categories are measures of how much, how many different types, and how frequently you pay on your debts. So really what the FICO score is measuring is how you interact with debt. So how that fits in with our plan, once you get rid of your debt and you do not take on any more debt, so you get rid of the credit cards, you get rid of the car payments, and you do not have any more in the future, that FICO score eventually is going to disappear because they don't have debt to track, there isn't payment history anymore, and you're not acquiring any new debt.
So literally, like, you don't have a FICO score anymore. It's not that you have a bad FICO score, it's that it just like doesn't exist at all.
Yep, so eventually that FICO score goes away. And that's what people will be worried about once they hear this in the program. They're like, well, what do I do if I don't have a FICO score? Well, if you don't have debt and you're not taking on new debt, you don't need a FICO score. The only thing that that FICO score is used for is qualifying you for more debt. So when you're not taking out new debt, it doesn't matter. That FICO score disappears and you can just say goodbye because you don't have to worry about trying to keep that score up because you don't need new debt.
And I will say there are some things that it does make a little bit more difficult. We've heard of places like to rent that sometimes require a FICO score, but a lot of those places will actually just take any sort of payment history. So we've been able to just show that like we paid all of our utilities on time for the last however many years they want to know and things like that. So there's usually a way around that. The other big one people talk about is getting a mortgage, and that's huge. First of all, if you haven't heard our hopeful goal for buying a house, I'll link that blog post here. But if we do end up getting a house and having a mortgage, we won't have a FICO score at that point. So what we're gonna have to do is something called manual underwriting, and not as many places do it anymore, but it's still definitely possible. So you can live without a FICO score. There's a couple of things that it makes a little more complicated just because our society has trained us to think that you have to have debt and that you can't live without it. But we've learned like the freedom that comes with not having debt and just kind of that weight off of your shoulders of not owing somebody and not owing interest and things like that. And so our FICO score is gone.
Doesn't exist.
It's gone. Let us know what questions you have about FICO scores or getting out of debt, and we would love to answer them on a future episode of Money Monday.
Definitely.
Thanks for tuning in.